I wanted to do a new microphone comparison video today, and normally I would just edit this and put it online without any commentary, but I thought today's video warranted a bit of explanation, both from the standpoint of what is it I'm comparing and why, and then also the technique I'm using to match levels on these mics once I've recorded it and imported it into a DAW. I think both are relevant. So obviously you see the title, you know that I'm comparing Oktava omnis with Schoeps omnis, and I'm also comparing similar Oktava in cardioids in ORTF versus omnis in spaced pair. So number one, why would I want to compare Oktavas with Schoeps? Schoeps are very high quality mics and expensive mics. Oktava are much less expensive, and what people generally say is that they are very good for their price point. Kind of like line audio, very, very good for their price point. At some point when you're recording orchestras and you're doing it professionally, you probably worry less about what is the best mic at this price point. You just want to find out what is the best mic for this specific application. But there are always good reasons to have less expensive mics, especially ones that can perform fairly well. So if you're using Schoeps or Neumann or line audio, Austrian audio for your mains, you could have an assortment of Oktavas, line audios, and other lower price mics for utility roles like spot miking and things like that. It just means you can have more of them. But obviously, along with a higher price comes a lot of other things like higher quality, better quality control, and things like that. So Oktava have a somewhat dubious reputation for quality control and just overall build quality. To me, in hand, the build quality feels pretty good, but they have a lot of handling noise and wind noise, which are design issues. But also, I bought a matched pair, and I've bought two single MK12 mics and then a matched pair. So I have four of them with multiple capsules, but one of the matched pair was actually very different from the other three. So I actually had to send it back and get a new one. The new one, and I could tell from the other three which one was the oddball. When I got the replacement, all four match pretty darn closely now, close enough for my applications. So there you have quality control issues. All of my MK12s are also wired out of phase with respect to every other mic I have. So I have to reverse their phase if I'm using them with other mics. And I generally try to do that at the preamp, but it's easy to forget. If you're mixing, you ought to notice it. But I should rewire them, but I just really don't. I don't want to deal with their small gauge wires because I'm not the best at soldering. Regardless, that is an issue as well. And as I mentioned, the wind and handling noise on the Oktavas is just ridiculous. And you'll hear that in these recordings. Just briefly about the setup, I'm recording all of this into an F8N Pro at 32-bit float because these are church bells. You can't just go ask them to play again. You get what you get, and I didn't want anything to peak. I do have all the preamp trim or gain set the same on all 6 channels. It's at plus 20 dB. I think that's what it was. Regardless, they're all the same. But with 32-bit float, you have a lot of leeway there, but they should all be at the same base level. So you will hear the sensitivity differences between all these mics. And I should issue this caveat up front. I am really bad with respect to understanding all of the various aspects of mics and preamps, sensitivity, dynamic range, and all these things. So bear with me, and I'll try not to misstate anything. But as much as I can, I've tried to make this an apples to apples comparison. And then, of course, again, I think it's also valuable at the same time that I'm A-Bing these two very different price point mics in both in omnis at the same configuration to then take 4 mics that are reasonably similar, the Oktava cardioids versus the omnis, and try 2 different stereo configs so you can hear the difference. My choice of using church bells, it's what I have in front of me. I can just walk to the park and set up and record this. I'm about 100 yards. Church bells are unique, obviously. I guess you could say all instruments are unique, but church bells are even more unique My high school grammar teacher is rolling over in her grave right now. But the overtones and everything you get on church bells are just unlike any other instrument, and it often makes it hard to even figure out what is the fundamental pitch because the overtones are so strong. But it is what it is, and I like recording ambience. I like recording church bells, so it is what it is, as I said. Okay, so the next part of this is just my process. I wanted to show you how I'm bringing these into the DAW and trying to get their levels somewhat similar, especially given the wind noise you'll hear on the octavas. It was a fairly still day, but even then, these things are so sensitive that it almost makes it impossible to use them outdoors. I had just a foam windscreen on the Schoeps, and that did pretty well. I had a mid-range dead cat on the octavas, but it still wasn't enough. This is not a Rycote. This is, I don't remember the name brand. I got them on Amazon, but for what it is, they do a decent job. There's only so much you can do with really sensitive mics and without having a blimp or something to add more dead airspace between the diaphragm and the windscreen. But it does a reasonable amount. But you'll still hear the wind noise and rumble. So, all right, so let me then put my headphones on here and let's listen to something. First thing I want to do here is just listening to where the bells begin. Right here, and I'm just going to play all three mics for you, starting with the cardioids, and I just let you hear each mic in turn. Okay, so a couple things you should have noticed there. From the outset, those cardioids, the octavas, had wind rumble at the beginning, and that was loud, and it will factor into how we want to try to level these out with respect to each other. The other thing is that the Schoeps are just louder than the other four mics, and they just have more information in them. It's interesting, we'll look at some loudness comparisons here. It's not necessarily that the peaks are significantly louder in the Schoeps, but let's go ahead and do a loudness analysis on all three of these regions. So I imported these. I mentioned how I record them, hopefully all at the same basic level of plus 20 dB on the input on the preamps. And then I've done nothing to them. I have not added any gain once I imported them here. So let's quickly do a loudness analysis on these and see what they look like. So looking only at the peak, the cardioids are at -20. -25 for the Oktava omnis, and -23. So despite the fact that the Schoeps sound significantly louder, the peaks are not that much difference between the two pairs of omnis. There's only 2 dB difference. Integrated loudness is different, though. The Schoeps are at -39. The Oktava omnis are at -45. So 6 dB difference there. And again, I think the wind noise and the rumble are probably contributing factors here, but I'm going to try to level these to the best of my ability. So in general, I would probably just level the peaks, make them all the same, add region gain to each one so that all the peaks are the same. But given the disparity between the differences in peaks and the LUFs, I think what I'll do is just try to bring the Schoeps up just a tiny bit, maybe to, I don't know, let's just go for -18 dB. So I'll just bring these up 5. So now, and I did bring up the previous regions here with the just ambience prior to the church bells, 5 dB. So next thing I want to do then is just look at them again, make sure I got in the right place. Forgive my OCD. I tend to do things multiple times here because I don't trust my memory. The goal was to get up to 18 dB here on the Schoeps, and that's what I've done. So now I'm going to choose to level the other two out by integrated loudness. So we're going to go for about 34.5 LUFs. So I need to bring this up by 9 and this up by 9. So that's easy. I'm going to get all of these and bring them up by 9. Okay, so region gains should have the integrated loudness very, very similar on these 3 clips. So negative 36, negative 36, negative 30. Whoa. Did I do the math wrong there? This is why I don't trust myself. So these have to come up another 2. How am I so stupid? Let's check them out again. Measure once, cut twice. Okay, so negative 34, 34, 34. Okay, so now that I have hopefully gotten their integrated loudness fairly comparable here, let's listen again to them A B seeing them and see how they compare. Okay, so I'd say I did a pretty good job at getting the levels similar. So, but having done that adjustment, I've done 5 dB of gain on the on the Schoeps, and then an additional 6 dB of gain on both sets of Oktavas. So that factors into it, right? The Schoeps are more sensitive. So, but once you add enough gain, then I think the Oktavas sound exactly as they are described. Very good for their price point. I would happily use these as spot mics. I would even use them as a main pair, just depending on the situation. Recently, I recorded an orchestra, and I wanted to put 2 sets of stereo mains on a boom, such that the cardioids were farther from the orchestra than the omnis, but it was on a single mic stand. So I used a boom. And unfortunately, the only thing I had to attach the cardioids on a stereo bar to the boom was a cheap Audix plastic clamp. And as I put my nice Austrian Audio SDCs up there, they were just heavy enough that I didn't trust the plastic Audix clamp. And so I thought they would stay, but I didn't want them to. They were just moving a bit too much. And I thought, what if they start sagging during the performance? So I opted for the Oktava because they were significantly lighter. So I actually used the Oktavas as mains, and I was pretty happy with it. I think the Austrian Audio would have sounded better, but it was what it was, and I adapted. And because I had some lower price alternatives, then I had some more options. So they do have their uses. I'm going to leave most of the qualitative analysis to you, let you see what you think about the sound quality of one versus the other. Next, I want to do just a little of the ambience before, just park ambience on before the bells start, mostly so that you can hear the difference in the near coincident cardioids in ORTF versus a spaced pair of omnis. And I could have chosen another config for the cardioids like DIN, or I always want to say POS, NOS, or I could have tried a different spacing on the omnis to better match their stereo recording angle. But I had limited time, so I decided to put these up. I think the omnis are at 55 centimeters, and of course the cardioids are what they are, 17 centimeters. So, but let's just listen to this so we can hear the differences between near coincident cardioids and ORTF versus a spaced pair of omnis. So clearly, in the park, we have birds in the trees. We have it's a spring day, a little bit of wind, so you can hear that above. Noticeably, though, you hear a major downtown street about 200 yards to the left. It's a 4-lane road on a Sunday morning. Yeah, Sunday morning. So not much traffic, but a little bit. You definitely hear that. The other thing I want to go to, though, is the wind noise here. And that is, I should have actually done this earlier, but let's just listen to this section here on loop. If you look at the waveforms here, you can actually see, I've marked with the location marker here when the wind starts, and you can actually see both of the octavas being disrupted here by low frequency wind noise. And that's where you see, instead of kind of a tight waveform, you see the low frequencies kind of dominating here, and you don't see that in the Schoeps. So visually, you can see where the wind is, but let's listen to it and let's pull up some real-time analysis of this. Let's see, how can I do this? Let's bring this over like this, and we've got, there we go. All right, so we should see the in this real-time analysis, the cardioids will show up blue, the Oktava omnis in green, and the Schoeps in red. So let's listen and watch for the low frequency here. Sorry, I had to bring the monitor down so that we can listen to all three at once without blowing out the speakers here. Let's do it again. Okay, so I'll try not to talk over them, but you can see in the blue and the green lots of information below 50 hertz. I'm going to play it again, looking at just the octavas, and then I will add the Schoeps to the real-time analysis so you can see the difference in rumble. So obviously you should use your ears more than your eyes, but when you see something like that, that should be a big clue here. And I did add a low-cut filter, low-cut high-pass filter at 80 hertz to each of these. They haven't been on for this demo so far, but I'll go ahead and add these and just see if we can hear the difference. I'm going to bring the monitor back up, and then I'll be soloing these. And so I'll start without the low-cut filter to each, and then I'll add it. I should actually turn up the speed a bit so that you can see this happening a bit faster. Okay, starting with the cardioids. So as you could see, even the Schoeps at that exact moment, right before I turned on the high-pass filter, you could see the rumble there too. So the little foam windscreens didn't, surprise, they didn't completely isolate them from the wind noise. But, so now that I have, and I believe this is at 80 hertz, let's see, yeah, high-pass filter at 80 hertz. So let's just listen to all three of these again. Now that we've eliminated the rumble and see the difference here. Let's go back to just before here, and we'll just hear all three with the high-pass filter on. Well, if you've listened to the end, I assume you might have gotten something helpful out of this video. I hope so. I'm open to suggestions on future videos. I don't have dozens of mics, but I have a dozen. One thing I thought might be interesting would be to put two pairs of identical omnis up on a stereo bar at different widths, different spacings, to hear the difference in stereo recording angle and the difference then in the width of recordings, just based on changing the stereo pair width. So perhaps another day.